right. We are here with the boys, the meat of the matter topics. We're talking about, you've heard all this stuff, you've heard all the stories, you've heard all the buzz, you've heard all the conspiracies, and now you're going to want to start a carnivore diet. You want to start maybe low carb. We're going to talk about carnivore from the beginning, new carnivores, what to kind of go through. Three of us, Mark, Peter, and Tony, we've been there. We've been doing this for quite a while, and we know that there's a lot of cognitive dissonance when you're starting, a lot of conflicting information all over the internet, all over social media. So we're here today to, maybe give you a little bit of insight, a little bit of a guide on how to start this. So we'll start with Mark. Mark, what do you think when someone comes up to you and they say, "Okay, I've heard of this. How do you introduce it? How do you start warm them up to the idea?"
So pretty much when they start, I just say it's pretty much an elimination diet. That's pretty much how it starts off. So I look at people's record and say, okay, what are you doing at the moment? What are you struggling with? Most of them will say, I can lose the weight, but I'm struggling with my mental health and I'm struggling with my gut. So that's where I'm saying, okay, I know what the problem is straight away. So instead of getting these guys straight into carnivore, I like to phase them in nice and easy. So maybe I'll start them off on, say, more of a Mediterranean kind of lifestyle. Then I'll move them into keto, and then eventually I'll move them into carnivore. But when they get into carnivore, they're actually asking me questions. They're actually asking me, "Mark, I don't actually think I need the fiber anymore. Mark, I don't think I actually need the carbohydrates anymore," which is a good thing, because the one thing I always said I was never going to do. If you look at my social media, I always said I was never going to be called carnivore Mark or carnivore coach or anything like that. The reason why I chose not to do that is because I live in a country where if you mention carnivore or keto, you're kind of like you're one of these people that you're trying to kill people. So if I had carnivore on my profile, I would have got nobody looking at my profile. Whereas now, when people come in and ask me questions, I can start them off exactly where they are in their life at the moment. But I know for a fact, after say 8 to 12 weeks, they're going to become fully carnivore. Now, the problem I see a lot with people when they do start carnivore at the very, very beginning is they go way too high in protein, way too high. And this is where they feel completely rubbish and they can't sustain it. People don't understand how important fat is when you're trying to get in shape. It's unbelievable. But the only two energy sources we have comes from fats and carbohydrates. So if you're going to be eliminating one energy source, you need to make sure you replace it with another energy source. If you feel like you're going to get energy from high protein, it's not going to work. You're going to have major, major problems. And that was one thing that I did when I started my journey at the very, very beginning. I said, right, because in my mind, I was like, okay, I'd say like 4 years ago, I was like, okay, but I'm still very, very worried about fats. I'm still very, very worried about cholesterol. So it's going to take a bit of time. So in my mind, I thought, okay, keep the fats low, but really increase the protein.
Right
So
on.
back then, I would have been probably eating around 3 grams per pound of body weight. So I probably would have weighed around maybe 130. So I was probably getting in roughly maybe 400 grams of protein a day, roughly.
Wow.
My fats would have been around maybe 60 or 70.
Yeah.
And I stick to it. I just couldn't do it. I felt like crap. My energy very, very low. So that'd be one big thing that I seen with people at the moment is that when they do go carnivore, they normally go high protein and they go low fat because of that reason, because a lot of people in the world are scared of eating fats.
So what you're saying is that the old guard info of fat makes you fat is a very big, important roadblock to get through, because you got to understand the importance of fat. And then, I'm going to get into the type 1 diabetic side in a second, Peter, but that fat, it's really important that we understand, and people get really uncomfortable because that's the thing that won't die. Well, there's two things that I notice quite a bit is cholesterol and fat. How essential fat soluble vitamins, essential fatty acids. These are things we need, but we undervalue them because of all the programming from the past. Now, Peter, you're a type 1 diabetic, and how we all came to this sort of in the same sort of like natural, organic way. What's your advice to people that are interested, and specifically, well, coming from a diabetic, you know, standpoint, how did you do it? What are your any kind of suggestions for people that are looking to try this?
Yeah, well, I liked the way that you started, Mark, about that it's a natural approach and that there's so much about carnivore besides eating meat and excluding vegetables. It's about the ketogenic aspect, about the low carb aspect, of course, excluding processed food and all those things. And for type 1 diabetics, there are two things important to realize. That is, what's healthy for normal persons is also healthy for a type 1 diabetic. And of course, we have to mind the sugar and carbohydrates a bit more. But also, it's a very good idea as a type 1 diabetic, since you are injecting insulin, to transition very slowly and to get accustomed to the new diet, the new lifestyle, and not to change your medicine too fast, because you already have so many uncertainties, and you want to learn also about what's happening. And that's also what I liked about what you said, Mark, that you have to phase in very slowly and learn about all those benefits that you already get from just going on a ketogenic diet, or just by excluding processed foods, or just excluding carbs at some point. That's what I also did. It took me about half to 3/4 of a year of going from medium carb, which was probably 100 grams a day or so. Then I started with the Dr. Bernstein approach, which is close to keto, I think 30 or 40 grams per day. Then I did that for several months, eventually becoming keto. And the nice thing about it, since we talked about the fat, what is it, the fat scare, is that, of course, if you go on the keto diet, that even more than on carnivore, you have to rely on fats. And I think you do it already in quite a natural way, and you don't too easily tend towards the proteins in the beginning. And I think I got a lot of benefits from being on keto, and actually also from including all those vegetables, because I at some point first started to eat more vegetables when going keto, because for example, you have this Dr. Burke advocating to eat all these leafy greens. And that caused problems for me. I had them already before, but especially on this diet, the last few months, I started to have cloudy urine every time after eating, that sort of things. I went through all kinds of kidney and bladder tests, echoes, lab tests, and it was all about the oxalates. It became clear later. But yeah, that's really, I'm happy about it, that I went through this, and that eventually in a very natural way I discovered carnivore. I mean, I heard about it, of course, but otherwise it would have been more difficult to start, to go over the threshold of accepting this extreme idea.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. And I mean, I often teach my clients and the people that I'm helping with stuff is, if you look for the good in some of the mistakes, it's learning. And if you're learning and you're realizing your body and you're feeling things, you start to know them. And then you can actually, when something goes, well, we'll say wrong, you can actually understand why. And when I'm teaching people that it takes time. And like both of you guys were just saying that, like you gradually get there. I did the same thing, low carb, bad keto diet, dirty keto for a while, then got a little bit more aware of, processed foods, vegetable oils, and all this stuff. And my transition into carnivore was pretty easy. But when people come to this, they hear all these miraculous stories about people going carnivore and this happened within weeks. And I have to hold the reins back with people, because it's like you have decades of unawareness, decades of things going on in your body, metabolic functioning, homeostasis is way out of whack. And when you switch something super fast, not only can there be a short-term, like full on shock, but nobody knows how long that fat adaptation takes for somebody. Could be some completely different for somebody else. And not to mention when when they start cheating or start flip-flopping, their progression slows right down, because we don't know how how the body's hooked on sugar. We don't know how, all these things that you've been doing for years and years and years and years and years. The brain and the body isn't stupid, and it wants to be comfortable. And I find that when you start cheating too early, or you start veering off your plan, which is a great, which we're going to get into, Mark, because this is why I believe, a coach can really help. But what happens is they start wondering why they're not getting those miraculous things. But, even just introducing carbohydrates to somebody 4 or 5 months into this, it might not be enough time for your body to get accustomed to, one, fat adaptation, and also being nourished. Like, we don't know. And we often put people in cookie cutters, and we say, this is good, this is bad. But there's so much nuance in there. And I find, like, new carnivores, the honeymoon period, we'll say, can be actually a nightmare if you don't really know what you're looking for. So I'm the same as you, Mark. I like to ease people in when they're comfortable, give them knowledge to why they're doing it, what's going on, and then, gradually get to it. But now,
Yeah, and Tony, let me add one thing about the diabetic side, is that what I hear a lot from other diabetics, there are quite some that have tried a keto diet or a carnivore diet for a short time, like 1 or 2 weeks, maybe even.
yeah,
But every time you hear that they were happy that they did it because they learned a lot. So that's since we talked about the learning aspect, it's just a good idea, even if you think you'll stop after 3 weeks,
but you know where
to pay attention.
But you know where people go wrong as well? Like all these brands, all these keto brands. You'll see like keto protein bars, keto cookies, all this crap. That's where people go wrong, because they think it's this marketing diet. Like when you walk into a shop, you'll see like so many brands with the word keto on it. And people automatically think that, okay, if I just eat this is going to change my life. And I was one of them, because I was a massive sugar junkie. I couldn't for It took me a long time to give up sugar, and I kept on fighting no matter what. Even though I kept on going low carb, I was like, in the back of my mind, I can still get away with eating sugar. It doesn't make a difference. I can still get away with eating sugar. No, I couldn't. I was never one of those people where I could moderate sugar. I don't think I could ever be like Paul Saladino, even though I have a good fitness lifestyle, I could probably get away with eating carbohydrates. I know by introducing a small bit, that just takes over me. I know for a fact. It's waiting in the background. I can't explain it, but I know if I have a little bit, that will lead to something really, really big. And that's the most important thing I try and get across to people when I take them on, is that the phase is very, very important. So at the very, very beginning, if you're a sugar junkie like I was, it could take 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, even 8 weeks for your body to heal, probably even longer, before you get into what you want to achieve, whether it's weight loss, build muscle, whatever it is. You need to allow your body to heal first, because it will be so much easier to achieve your goal a lot faster.
Yeah. And, Peter, speaking from like what you said there, Mark, Peter, that's exactly how a type 1 diabetic has to look at this. It's like,
Yeah.
we all look at this like I heard Peter's kicking ass and taking names. I'm going to eat just like Peter. But how he got there, how his past, how his history, how his physiology, how his biochemistry, how his brain works is different than mine. And I mean, I do believe, like, and Dr. Anthony Chaffee is one of my heroes. And when you look at his beginning carnivore, he'll say, just start eating fatty meat, eat to satiety, eat till it tastes good, drink water, and that's all great. And in a perfect world, that is obviously what we want to do. But there's so much nuance in the way that people come to this. And I think a lot of times we measure ourselves against each other, which is, we're, we're all different, and the way our body got here. So I usually try and say, where find your 0 point. That's the 0 point that we're supposed to get to, and that fat adaptation, the elimination of processed foods, the keto treats. And when I started keto, there was no keto treats. All of a sudden, about a year into it, it was like keto bombs, keto this, keto that in the grocery stores. After the world was saying how bad keto was, you noticed the processed food companies start jumping up. So Peter, when someone comes, like, what do you suggest? Like, when do they cut out the carbs? Like, well, obviously they have to do it sometime, but they're like, say they come to you and they're like, okay, I'm type 1 diabetic. How much protein? How much fat? What do you say?
Oh, that's a difficult question, and I think the answer would be the same as what you just told. That it depends really on the person, probably. If they come from a carb-heavy diet, we have to take it slowly. And with diabetes, there's also the aspect that carbs can be, many carbs can be difficult, but difficult carbs can also be difficult. Yeah, it sounds a bit strange, but if, for example, you're eating a lot of carbs combined with a lot of proteins and fats, or carbs heavy in fiber, they can make the digestion process more unpredictable. And if on top of that also the amount of carbs is large, or the amount of proteins even, then of course you are going to introduce a lot of uncertainty again. And during the learning process, that's very difficult. So just like on carnivore, where you start typically with BBB and E diet, probably, the beef, butter, bacon, and eggs, in that order, I think. Yeah. As well, on the type 1 diabetic side, you should probably start first with cutting out all the difficult foods. So if you're still eating things like beans, legumes, or starchy vegetables, I would start to remove those. Remove the grains. Then you're left with some fruit, which is relatively easy for a diabetic, at least in terms of predictability. And then eventually you'll cut those out as well, and you'll be left with something like avocados or so, and let's say a little bit of vegetables, 20 grams, 30 grams of carbohydrates per day. And from there on, I think it doesn't really matter too much. You can just, depending on your personality, go all the way, or take it easy, or stay there even, because for diabetes management, you are already there. And for me, it took a long while, a long learning process actually to, from going from keto, low carb, to carnivore. First, it actually worsened a little bit, my glucose control, just by a little bit. It was still very nice.
Yeah.
And I was at an HbA1c of 5.2. Now, after 2 years carnivore, I actually got a blood test 2 days ago. Oh, yeah. It was a 4.9 A1C.
Congratulations.
And yeah, that's I was surprised as well. But going there and getting things stable as before during those keto days, because you have to deal with all the proteins, which is also a difficult food in a way. That takes time as well. So you have to be patient as well. That's really important.
Yeah. I find with women, especially with women, they do a lot better on high protein. Yeah. Because I usually hear an awful lot of women that will say this: they have lack of energy, they feel tired. Don't get me wrong, fats are extremely important for hormone production.
Oh yeah.
But I think that they're more important for men, to be honest. Like, once women are getting a good balance. The way I work it out is if a woman comes to me and she's like, let's say she weighs 160 pounds. Yeah. I'll make sure she's getting 160 protein and 160 fat. That's where I'll start off with. Yeah. Now, if she wants to drop weight, the fats are going up and the protein's going down.
That's that's the funny thing that, like, we did talk about. I just wanted to see your opinion and get your opinion, because how do you find, Peter, we'll get to you in a minute. I want to get Mark, and then we'll get you, because this is kind of cool. How do you feel? Do people, when they cheat, like, how long do you find, like, the difference when people start the carnivore diet? They're kicking ass, and then they get cocky. Like, we all do it. We've all done it. Oh, I can eat cake now. I'm good. I feel good. What do you like? How do you notice that? Like, how people get sort of reset? Do you notice a difference in their progressions, in their development? You would say,
Oh, 100%. And
yeah,
100%. Once you increase the fats and you bring the protein down, this is where I see the best results.
yeah,
The best results. So, like at the very, very beginning, somebody could be eating for me like nearly 70% of their overall food intake coming from fat.
yeah,
So they're eating a lot of fat. And the reason for that is very, very simple. Is not only do you want to lose weight, but you want to feel good doing it along the way.
yeah,
Along the way, everything in your life is just getting so much better. And
yeah,
when these people get to this stage, this is when I get the questions.
yeah,
Mark, I feel amazing. Mark, I'm not on the medication anymore. Mark, my joint pains are gone. Everything is just gone. And I'm like, bingo. Okay, now we're on the right track. Another reason why I chose to do it this way, because I did this to myself back in like a year ago when I did a bodybuilding competition. I made sure to get really, really lean, like say about 10 weeks out from my show. I was eating about 75% of my overall food intake was coming from fats,
yeah,
not protein. Because at that stage, when you're trying to get shredded, like really, really shredded, the last thing you're trying to build is muscle. It's impossible. You
yeah,
cannot build muscle when you're
yeah.
on when you're on
You're
low.
either putting on or taking away, right? Like
That,
that's kind of the
that,
way it works. Yeah,
but the one thing you should never be lacking is energy.
yeah,
And when you look at the bodybuilders that were there on that day, these people were like zombies
yeah,
because they brought their food down too low. They had no energy going into their bodies whatsoever. They took out even fish. They took out fish oils out of their diet. It was
yeah.
crazy.
So your
Absolutely
brain's,
crazy.
yeah, no doubt.
And when you look at these people on stage, these people, you could see that they were dying. They were
And and quickly,
dying.
Mark, what happens to the, we'll just say the normal, the old guard bodybuilders when they're done the contest and they introduce carbs back into, like, they go eat a
I
bunch of,
blow up. They blow up. They
yeah,
absolutely blow up. I know a friend of mine that done a bodybuilding competition. This was years ago. This is about 8 or 10 years ago. And straight after the show, he went out and he ate a lot of food, like a lot of junk food. The next day, he gained 20 pounds in weight.
and that's, it's funny because Peter, you're on one side of that where you're a diabetic and you have to watch your insulin and you're like very, you need to focus on it. The other extreme is the bodybuilders that are up and down in weight and they are leveraging their calories, but it's not healthy. And
No,
that's what like, it's just, if we can learn something from that, as soon as these guys that are super, super low body fat percentage lean, like they call it dry and like ripped, as soon as they introduce carbohydrates, boom, weight comes flying back on. If that's on anything, Peter,
but but
what?
just one more thing. Not only that, when I did the bodybuilding competition back in November, a lot of those bodybuilders were saying to me they were miserable.
Yeah,
Absolutely miserable. They said to me that yeah, they looked amazing. They had the abs, they had the veins, but they could not wait
yeah.
until it was over because
So it's,
they were
yeah,
absolutely miserable.
and that's putting yourself in that state. Imagine what we're doing when we're low carb, or sorry, low fat, low protein, eat less, move more. You're doing that to yourself every day. That's not the goal, Peter.
And it's a roller coaster, also in terms of insulin resistance, because I think those people, they will eat so little, then you'll become insulin sensitive anyway, whether it's low fat or low carb or anything. And then the competition is finished. Within a matter of days or weeks, they are going to eat a load of carbohydrates. Their insulin resistance goes up right away. That goes very quickly because I know that from when the cycling season would end for me on carb-loaded cycling.
Mm.
Same thing happens. You gain this water weight there because I guess this 20 pounds is mostly water weight first, but very quickly, of course, you just gain a lot of fat as well, and insulin resistance comes back, and just
And
this idea that
and straight
it's just
out,
crazy.
and that's what you notice with a bodybuilder. Like straight after the show, like say about 10 weeks after the show is done, when you look at them, they look completely different. They're carrying all this water, they're carrying this belly. Like all that muscle, all that the shape that they had is gone very, very quickly, very, very quickly. Whereas the way we are right now, we're eating the way we should be eating, and we're able to maintain this year in, year out. I mean, I've said this many, many times on this page that I'm walking around now with a 6-pack without putting any effort into my body whatsoever. I'm
Right.
not. I'm not counting my macros. I'm training only 3 times. I'm doing less now than what I did 10 years ago, and I'm maintaining the 6-pack year out.
Okay, I have a question for you, Peter. Counting macros as a new carnivore, good idea? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I come from a background, of course, that I have to count some macros. Carbs becomes easy. I don't need to count them anymore. Although, well, if you eat a piece of liver or so, then that's enough to require insulin injections because of the glycogen. But yeah, counting the proteins, I have a rough idea as a diabetic, but besides that, I don't think it's really needed. And I personally don't understand why people focus so much on counting proteins, for example, because okay, maybe in special circumstances, like the case we talked about before now with the women and energy problems. If you have issues, maybe check how much you are eating, get a rough idea, and determine whether you should eat, for example, say 2 pounds or 3 pounds of meat per day. But once you have determined that, you can just leave it and eat like that, and eat to satiety, and sometimes keep in the back of your mind, like, okay, I should be around this figure. That would be a good idea. But besides that, no, I don't see the use.
What I find a lot of times, like just what I do personally. I mean, I'm at the point now. I think we're all at that point now where we know our bodies, we know sort of the signals, we know what's up, and I mean, the amount of conversations I have with people, and the answer is I eat healthy, but yet every day they have headaches, or every day they have joint inflammation or joint pain or something chronic that's going on. And when you're trying to start this way of eating, I believe, like we just talked about, the two extremes. Peter's the insulin side of things, which is being extremely insulin resistant, and your metabolism's a mess, and also suffering really by choice as a bodybuilder to diet for a show. You're putting yourself in such a calorie deficit, trying to outwork that thing. Those are the two extremes of probably not great metabolic health, where we're all kind of in the middle. But it's that self-testing thing that I think is very valuable. And when we start with this framework, and I know Mark's got clients and he starts them off, but what we're trying to say really, I think, is being able to understand the trial and error process to get to the point where you're comfortable with your protein to fat ratio, right? Like, I mean, I can't tell you exactly, but when, like I say it quite often, is when you feel it, you know it. And if you did something yesterday and you're different today, there's cause and effect. Something had to change. And Mark, I don't know, like when you wake up, what's your sort of thoughts on food? Like how? Because I know everybody focuses on that. They think I need to eat at this time. I need to eat this much at this time. Do you tell people to get regimented, or do you sort of guide them to more of a natural progression, so to speak?
No, it's all natural. I want to guide them, like what you said, Tony. When they get to that stage where they're getting deeply fat adapted, they're in ketosis, like you mentioned, the last thing they want to be doing again is thinking about macros, like calories, tracking stuff, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, like for the healing process, you just want to let them just enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
Eat until satiety, and that's it. Once you're in the right food, I have no issues with you having as much as you like.
Yeah.
You can eat as much as you like, and
Yeah.
that's the one thing that people like when I work with them, is like the first 6 to 8 weeks, I just say, listen, as long as you're eating the right food, I don't track anything. Just eat.
So, because like when I take on a client, first most of, like the people that I work with, I like to work with people that are interested in knowing, like not just here's a diet plan, here's the thing, do this and go. That's you know what? I'm not a nutritionist for that reason. I don't believe that there's a one size fits all and everybody should be doing this. Here's a diet plan, follow it, and if you don't do it, it's you're broken. I like to teach people about, you know, the process of elimination, why you need fat first of all, and that's a hard one to get across. Like every time, it's like, no, we have to change our mindset about fat. And then as they go, the end game is to find your way, is to find Mark or Peter's way, your way in your body. If you're giving yourself the essential nutrients, which we can get into that too, because a lot of people think meat is bad. And it's like, once you realize that everything you need is actually in meat, and if you have, you know, good quality fat, you're getting all the essential nutrients. The body starts in a cruise control aspect. And, you know, Peter, from a diabetic standpoint, you know, was there a point where you're like, how would you do if you didn't monitor your glucose now? Like, would things change? How much would things change? There you go.
Yeah, this is not my glucose, by the way. This is my ketones.
Yeah.
Just to add on to the story of a moment ago, this is why you have to eat fat.
Yeah. Dude, okay, that's a good question for you, Peter. Do you have to track ketones?
No. So this is just for fun. And as a type 1 diabetic, I get these strips from insurance. They are quite expensive. I think they are $1 a piece at least. Yeah. And as a type 1 diabetic, especially if you are on a carb-rich diet, you should measure them. If you have symptoms that could indicate ketoacidosis. Look it up at what it is if you don't know it. That's not. It's a long story because it's a nuanced thing, but yeah, tracking ketones. Besides that, I don't think it's needed. It's very insightful, of course, in the beginning. If you have the thing, by all means, measure it in the beginning to have an idea about ketosis, and do it with these things from a finger prick, not with your urine.
Yeah. Because I did everything. When I started, I counted calories, I counted macros, I counted ketones, I was testing my blood sugar, I was writing my stuff down, taking a food log. And honestly, the stuff that I learned doing it was valuable. But once
if it helps you,
once I realized it was unnecessary, it's kind of like you watch the people, especially on social media, couples, they're chasing each other with keto numbers. And it's like, everybody's going to be a little different. Mark, do you track ketones?
No.
Do you track?
No. I just go by how I feel.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, Mark, saying that, like, what did we do before all this stuff? You know, I understand Peter's in a very special situation, being a type 1 diabetic. It's in his best interest to keep track of stuff. But, you know, I often tell people, like, what did we do before? You know, how did you know to go to the doctor? You felt like shit, or something happened to you and you go to the doctor. But how did you eat? You ate what the earth provided in, you know, some way, shape, or form. Now, you want to argue plants are good, plants are bad. But when we're taking this, like, new, have to realize what we're doing is, you know, I believe we're stripping away all the distractions. Mark said it before, elimination diet. But really, that's exactly what it is. And my words of advice to people, we have no idea now. Our world is so far gone from environmental pollution, toxins, our whatever they're spraying and doing to our crops, our monocrop agriculture. It's just so far removed from natural situations. We have no idea how we're going to feel when we start eliminating these things. And I think there's that double-sided when people are wanting to start a carnivore diet. Taking away all that stuff, you know, it's crazy how many people freak out in the first couple weeks. But you know what? Like, Peter, how do you feel about plants? And like what you even said it, like, go a little bit more on the dark leafy greens. You felt worse when you focused on it.
Yeah, but besides that, I think you should also not worry too much about plants in general. Just the thing is that I made this video on TikTok about oxalates in spinach. And you see two sides of the equation. Those people that are saying, like, you're just talking a lot of shit and it's nonsense, it's healthy, and you're eating all this meat. So spinach is the very first thing that you should be adding to your diet. That, and on the other side, that of course the extreme carnivores that say that you should never eat those things.
Yeah.
By no means. And I think they are basically interpreting Anthony Chafee in the wrong way. I mean, Anthony Chafee is just using a figure of speech, and he likes to emphasize things, but even he doesn't think this.
I think another thing what people really struggle with is when they look at their plate and they see that there's more getting removed, like the vegetables, the carbohydrates, all that kind of stuff, and then they're only left with basically meat. I think in people's minds, I know for me, that took an awful long time to comprehend.
That's a good point, Mark. I want you to get into that, because that, I believe, is the single most biggest curveball roadblock that new carnivores get in the way of, is they way under eat.
Yeah.
So yeah, because like when you're eating to satiety and it can be a little counterintuitive, to say the least, when you're like filling up on the stuff that you're like, well, this was giving me colon cancer last year, now I'm eating all of it, right? Like it can be like under eating, I think, is a big deal. Do you know?
I mean, for me, I used to have like a Sunday roast, and I used to have like potatoes, like lots of veg, chicken, turkey, like gravy, all that kind of stuff. I used to have like a big meal. Going from that to just putting a piece of steak on my plate, that took a long time for me to like kind of say, like I'm gonna be under eating here. But then when you start eating it, it's like, no, hang on a second, I'm getting full. Full.
And I do believe in like what Anthony Chafee says is, when you know your natural hunger, satiety signals are online, when that steak stops tasting good. When you're like, I can't, oh, this is delicious, and it's almost like one bite and I'm done. I'm just done. So that's a really good sign that you're getting into that, because I find a lot of people, and I'm sure, Peter, when you're monitoring your stuff, like getting to that point to understand how real natural hunger works is probably a big deal, especially when you're dealing with insulin and blood sugar. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And well, on one hand, I don't think I experienced it very differently from other people.
Yeah.
But of course, if you are low on sugar, that still happened. Actually, yesterday I just overdosed the insulin, and then I got low, so I had to eat some glucose. And I really felt this instinctive urge to eat. So if there would be, I imagine, especially if you're beginning the carnivore diet or keto diet, if there would be a package of cookies, I would have eaten it. Now, if it were there, I would still be able to not eat it. But those are difficult things.
That's a really good point. Go ahead, Mark.
I say one more thing to Tony as well. One thing I see where people go wrong in carnivore as well is nobody has any electrolytes. I think electrolytes are extremely important.
Definitely.
Extremely important, because if you're getting fatigued, your energy is very, very low. It may not be the diet. You may need to add in some electrolytes. So you've got to remember, if you're taking out carbohydrates, you need to basically replace that with something different. Your body actually needs electrolytes when you go actually into this stuff. You don't need a lot. You don't need a lot of it.
That's a good point, because
you also need to make sure that the brand that you get is because I know there was a study on the LMT one last year.
Maltodextrin.
Yes.
Rob Wolf he ate a little bit of crow for that one. I saw the interview when he was explaining it, and it's like, it is what it is. I don't, because like we'll get Peter. I'll get to you 1 second. I just wanted to say, like, with electrolytes with me, I take potassium, or I have potassium, I have magnesium, and I have salt. I don't like electrolyte drinks because you know what? You never know. And when I explain this to people, water follows carbohydrates. When you release your carbohydrates, water leaves. If the ocean dehydrates you and distilled water dehydrates you, somewhere in the middle is where your water needs to be mineralized. So when your requirements go up for these electrolytes, and the tricky part is about the new carnivores is this can be very nuanced. So just because Mark takes this much or this electrolyte does not mean that's for you. I know some people that require a lot less salt And the shitty part is this changes. This can change as you get more fat adapted, as you get more into this journey. So a lot of people, like I like to believe that our kidneys are beautiful organs and they're functioning properly. They know what to do. So excess to a marginal excess, the kidneys will remove it, no problem. They know how to regulate it, but not enough. Well, we can that might be a big problem. Cramping, heart stuff. You gotta just be. A lot of times people say just do this, and I think that's where we come into. It's very nuanced. Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. Not so much to add. Just in terms of blood labs, a few days ago I also measured my sodium in the blood. I eat quite some salt, and it was on the low side, maybe even below the reference threshold. So just like with Kerry Mann from Homestead How, he also tells that, and you see his videos, how much salt he puts on his steak. His sodium is also considered low.
And that's a good point there, Peter, because what we got to realize with blood tests too. I know we did an episode on it, but when you're measuring against the people that aren't you, and not to mention sodium is constantly being used. Every cellular function, it's an electrolyte. It's an electrical charge. Sodium and potassium are doing their thing. That's a timestamp. That doesn't mean you're deficient. That just means at that time in your blood, that sodium is at a set level that they deem good or bad, which is really tricky. So the ability to use the sodium and to use salt is everybody's going to be different. Your activity level, somebody that's sedentary drinking a lot of coffee, this will dehydrate you. So it's very nuanced. What do you think about that, Mark? Let's get into a little bit of electrolytes, because that's a big thing with new carnivores. They get worried. What's your feeling, and how do you sort of navigate that?
No, I think it's extremely important, because that's the one thing I noticed straight away, that when people get deep into carnivore, the one thing that comes up is fatigue. Like they're getting cramps, they're still getting headaches, they're noticing their heart rate is getting elevated, and they have low energy, they're not sleeping properly. This is where I feel electrolytes, and especially magnesium, and getting that potassium, magnesium together. This is what fixes the problem straight away. But I think it's extremely important that you don't need to get it in a supplement, because like Tony was saying, like most brands are crap and they're full of sugar, and they will have an impact on insulin. You can get it through. There's a lot of good salts out there at the moment. So I'd be looking at like the likes of Himalayan. There's a good few brands out there, but you don't need to take it to the extreme. That's one thing you don't need to do. So again, if you have a sedentary lifestyle, you don't need that much. Whereas if you're extremely lean, like really, really lean, maybe you'll need a bigger dose. Whereas the majority of people would only need somewhere in the middle. That's where I find what works a lot better.
Okay. Peter, I have a question for you. Supplements. Most carnivores, they're going to take some supplements. What are your thoughts on? Do you need to supplement on a carnivore diet?
Yeah, well, let's do a round of what supplements we are all taking. But I'll start now. Then I'll take some vitamin D with K2. Also, that I got checked by a blood lab finally, because I think it is still a good idea. I mean, it's okay. Maybe it's not always necessary. If you just take medium dosage in the winter, you'll be fine. You won't really overdose. But just doing one-time lab measurement is a good idea. Maybe just to have an idea where you're at. And I know for myself that I can be quite deficient in D3 if I don't take anything. D3. So for sleeping, I take some magnesium glycinate. So also the glycinate part will help just for sleeping purposes. And during exercise, I would take some additional electrolytes in, say that I'm cycling, especially that sort of exercise. Then I'll say that I drink 1 liter every hour. I'll put in a typical half package of Element, probably. I'm not using Element, but just to give an idea. Then there is iodine. I think since you are not having the iodized salt from the bread, then it's a good idea to add it in. Iodine, and that's it. I think for diabetics, vitamin B1 or benfotiamine.
Yeah,
Can be very useful for all kinds of symptoms. So I used that in the beginning.
cool.
Yeah.
Mark, what about you? What supplements you use?
I don't take that much. I mean, the only ones I take, I pretty much take a vitamin D3. I used to take 5,000 IU, but now I'm taking in 10,000 IU every day.
Yeah.
I used to take magnesium because I used to have struggled sleeping, especially when I was on a high fat diet. But I find now when I eat very, very close to bed, I have no issue sleeping at all. And then at the odd occasion, I'll maybe have an electrolyte drink before I train, but mostly I'll just add salt to my water. But in regards to supplements, I don't spend a fortune on supplements at all. I think the only one that we do need though, and I think it should be recommended for everybody, is a vitamin D3, 100%. That should be always the staple, because the reason why I think vitamin D is very, very important is because you won't get the same benefit out of it if you're eating the standard American diet or 6 meals a day. You need to eat fats.
Yeah.
So to get the most benefits out of vitamin D, you need to make sure you're on a high fat diet. And then magnesium. I think magnesium is extremely important.
Yeah.
Now, I would favor you're making sure you're not getting an all round magnesium. You're getting like the right dose. So if you're getting a citrate or a glycinate or whatever it, make sure it's a magnesium, and the higher dose the better. But yeah, like supplements for me, I don't need them anymore. I used to spend a fortune, an absolute fortune on supplements before, whereas now I'm getting all the minerals and vitamins in my food, so I don't need supplements or anything.
Yeah, I myself, I look at it from a standpoint of, in an optimal world where we'll be eating things from God and Mother Nature intended, it's a different ballgame. But now our animals, and just touching on your vitamin D3, you only get vitamin D3 from the animal kingdom. If you're getting it from the plants, you got to convert it. It's a whole, just D3. I agree. But when animal husbandry was outside, and the animals are outside, their skin is outside, the fish skin, that's where we would have gotten the D3. But now, just because of our natural, our practices, I believe most of the animals are inside a lot more than they are outside. You got to take in consideration, if you're not eating pasture raised animals, you're gonna have, I believe it. So I do the same thing. I was taking about 5,000 IUs in the wintertime. Now I'm up like 10,000. If I start to feel meh, I take 20,000 a day.
Yeah.
But,
and I say that to people around here. Like, listen, if you're sick, if you're dying, your vitamin D needs to be. Forget about vitamin C. Forget about buying vitamin C. Get your vitamin D up as high as you can. And people are looking at me and saying, "No, my doctor recommends I should be only taking 2,000 IU a day." And I'm like, "Oh, listen to me.
enough.
Double your IU.
I agree.
Yeah, and in terms of supplements, I think I agree with you, Tony, that in an ideal world you don't need them. But on the other hand, I also don't fully agree with the idea that a lot of people follow that, say, 10 or 20,000 years ago, everything was perfect and you didn't need them, because probably in all kinds of circumstances, we would have been just deficient in those things. And the nice thing is that we can do something about it with supplements.
And not to mention, just saying that, like, we're exposed to a hell of a lot more now. Like our immune systems are exposed to a lot more now. And I mean, obviously we can get into this, but I believe this is with magnesium. I think we would have got, the plants would have absorbed the nutrients from the soil. The animals ate the plants, we ate the animals, or we ate the plants. Either way, when you're getting plants from a depleted soil, I think magnesium is down. So we don't really have any idea anymore about the magnesium content. We just assume broccoli is the same as it was 50, 60 years ago, which I believe is not. And I think magnesium is so vitally essential. Taking magnesium and anything that's it's better to do a little bit more than not have enough. I think so I would err on the side of more. So magnesium, and obviously salt. Like I try and get different varieties of good quality salt. I salt liberally, little pinch of salt in the morning. If I ever think I'm getting a headache, I just take salt. It goes away like almost instantly. And then something that I kind of do that I've just started really is becoming aware of glycine. Now, if I'm eating bone broth, And well, I'm not going to get too deep into the glycine to methionine ratio and the homocysteine levels, but when you're eating the connective tissue and you're eating all the animal, you're getting all this stuff, the amino acids, and obviously we do make a little bit of glycine. But now here's why: when I'm not drinking bone broth or making something that's really gristly and connectivey and gelatinous, I've been putting glycine in my coffee, because now the glyphosate that's been rampant across our world, that's made from glycine, and they don't really know that might be disrupting our natural glycine. So if I'm drinking bone broth, I don't do it. But if I'm not, and I'm like, there's times where I kind of go without the bone broth, I just been putting a little tiny scoop of glycine in my coffee. But that's pretty much the supplements I use. Like, I mean, I
That's
don't.
interesting. And this is this a simple supplement? Is it like, for example, creatine? Is it like a very
Yeah,
simple and pure thing?
It's actually sweet, so it like sweetens up your coffee a little bit. But we can talk about that another time. But that's kind of my take, is like, because what do you think about a multivitamin on carnivore, Peter?
I know some people that take them, and maybe it doesn't do harm, but I personally think it could do harm, because, for example, if you look at ascorbic acid that they add also in food, it's not vitamin C, because it lacks in all the cofactors. And if you lack if those cofactors are lacking, your body will have to find those cofactors, and it will just cause all kinds of imbalances. And vitamin Bs are often very bad quality
Synthetic.
B vitamins. When I used B1, for example, I used benfotiamine.
Yeah.
It's a fat-soluble version, and the regular, I think it's hydrochloric thiamine or something like that. That's basically useless. If you need to take a dosage of 10 or 20-fold to get the same effect, if you even get it.
Yeah.
And then I could go on with all the other B vitamins.
Just to state, because a lot of people take these multivitamins, and like, we've been grown up on Flintstone vitamins, and take your vitamins. Really, like, I don't know, Mark, how you feel about this, but all the vitamins you need should be from your diet. And I believe multivitamin is an egg. What do you think?
You're missing out on nothing. You're like you should be like what Peter was mentioning earlier. Like, what did we have 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago? We didn't have all these supplements. We could get everything that we needed in our food.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything. And when we go back to the multivitamin, when you look at the amounts, the dose in each vitamin, when you look at the bottle, it's minimal. It's absolutely minimal. There's
Sorry, I do take. I forgot. I've started this recently after Rachel Bright talked about iodine, and the only reason why I take iodine maybe once or twice a week is because I thought our soil has been so depleted from it. So that's it. But Mark, you're right. Like, all these multivitamins, and not to mention calcium carbonate is limestone. So you might be sucking on a rock, right? Yeah. Like, that's your osteoporosis fix. I think you should be eating some protein.
Absolutely. That's the one thing that I speak to a lot of women that are struggling with brittle bones, osteoporosis.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them will say to me, "But do I not need Greek yogurt? Do I not need to have a high calcium diet?" And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, the only thing that you should be having is a high fat diet.
Yeah.
You have more collagen.
Yes.
You need to get more of the animal, like the dead skin, all that kind of stuff. That's what's going to do amazing things to your bones.
Yeah.
Not the calcium. The calcium is going to do nothing for you. So those calcium supplements,
especially the inorganic calcium, that's like nothing. It's not even. Yeah. And I mean, now people are eating eggshells. Peter, do you eat eggshells? I saw you eat a few eggs.
Yeah, I made a video about eggs, and I talked about cholesterol, and I think if you eat 15 eggs, then you'll get 30 grams of calcium. So you could eat one eggshell a day or so, but yes, just to get back a little bit to the supplements, I do think that I do believe very strongly in therapeutic use of supplements, and I think also the vitamin D is an example. We take such huge doses. Much more than we would physically see in our bloodstream, and B1 is a similar example. So you could use a single pill and it won't do anything. But on channels like on Elliot Overton's channel on
definitely.
B1, you'll learn a lot about, and of course, that's a nice channel, but you have to be very careful, of course. But if you do it and you determine the right dosage, it could sometimes be like a tenfold of what you see on the package.
Do you know what I've noticed with people when I had a client that she was clumsy. She was dropping dishes. She was all over, like just stubbing her toe and like all this stuff. I got her to do a megadose B1 for a week and then back off on it. It all went away. It's interesting.
Yeah.
That can be a game changer.
For that sort of thing is short term mostly, because chronic use in that way probably is, no matter what the situation is probably a bad idea. But
so I think we covered a lot of ground here today, guys. Like the new carnivores out there. My last thoughts, and then we'll get to you guys in a minute, is learn, and realize that you're your own body. You're your own person, and everybody's going to be a little different. Like the framework can be very similar, but the trial and error factor. And once you realize that, like, it's not personal. Just because somebody thrives on something doesn't mean that you're gonna. And like a lot of times we take it to heart, and it's to let it go and realize that it's your unique self. Come up with a plan. I believe in hiring a coach, because these are little nuances that you can get help and get to a place a lot faster, because we've all been there, and we went through the curveballs, the roadblocks, and all the the hiccups. And like my idea is to help people find their way to get to their proper human diet. And there's a lot of information out there, and just use discernment and learn about this stuff before you just jump 2 feet in, because it can be very, very uncomfortable if you do that. Mark, your last thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The last thing you want to be doing is, if you're listening to people and you're hearing all this about carnivore and you're thinking, I'll just jump straight into it, that's the worst thing you can do. You need to make sure that, as we mentioned at the very, very beginning, if you guys are a carb junkie, you're a sugar junkie, you're an alcoholic, whatever that situation is, it's not just a quick fix, guys. You can't just jump into this. It's not possible. It's like talking to an alcoholic and saying to an alcoholic, okay, I need to quit straight away. It's not possible. You need to give the person support, guide them in the right direction. It's the exact same thing with carnivore. We've all done the exact same thing. Every one of us have done the diets. The reason why all of us now are doing carnivore is because we did the mistakes. We did the low carb, we did the high protein, we did the keto. It took us a bit of time to eventually get there. We can help you get there a lot faster with the right education.
Peter?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with the same things and just repeat what you said. But let's say also read, and watch, because you'll have a lot of hurdles to take, a lot of commonplace knowledge that you will have to, of which you discover isn't always true. So it's very good to continuously gather all kinds of information. Channels like Low Carb Down Under, watch those. In the car, when I'm driving long distance, especially, I would put on Dave Mack's channel with stories of other carnivores. And personally, I did a little bit of, once in a while, I would even read a research article or so. And in the beginning, a lot of those Q&A sessions, now I don't watch them so much, because I'll know the answers most of the times. But that's so useful. Yeah. Put in a lot of knowledge. That's just very important.
Yeah. And on our way out, just remember, guys, there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of bad advice. And if you have a problem with something Peter, Mark, or I said today, dig into it, challenge it. I don't pretend to be perfect. I don't pretend to be right. I know Mark feels the same way. But you know what? When the proof is in the pudding, and we've seen people heal arguably miraculous things. Peter is kicking ass and taking names as a type 1 diabetic. Most people in the world would tell him he's crazy. And most people would say that can't be done, or it's dangerous. And you just, in this space, if you're new to this, just please use your discernment. And the beautiful thing about most of the carnivore veterans in this space is they're very approachable. And I know you can call Mark any questions, ask Peter. Of course, I'm around. You can find us on our associated channels and stuff. We're going to be live on Sundays at 10, the Meat of the Matter podcast. And I think we lost Mark there, but that's Mark. He's Peter. I'm Tony. Thank you so much for being here. And please, if you have any questions, let us know.
See you next time.
I'll let Mark say goodbye. Mark, say goodbye.
Bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.